Laura was known for her energy and enthusiasm. From a young age, her adventurous spirit led her to seek new challenges, especially outdoors. Passionate about trails and mountains, Laura felt that each walk was an opportunity for renewal, a moment to connect with herself and with nature. She wasn't just an outdoors person. For Laura, hiking was her true passion, something that was part of who she was. Whenever he could, he organized excursions with friends, explored unknown routes and explored places that few dared to tread. The freedom Laura felt as she hiked through rugged terrain, climbed slopes, and breathed in the fresh mountain air was something she deeply valued. It didn't matter how difficult the path was, rocks, mud, steep sections, or unexpected obstacles. For her, each challenge was an invitation to overcome. Laura faced the unknown with courage and always encouraged those who accompanied her to move forward, to seek a little more, to explore beyond. Her active life and love of adventure were what defined her. Being on the move and challenging his own limits were part of his essence, and the trails were where he truly felt at home. It was supposed to be another ordinary day of adventure. Laura and some friends decided to explore a trail she already knew well, full of stunning scenery and breathtaking views. They were excited, and Laura, as always, led the group with enthusiasm, encouraging everyone to move forward. But along the way, something unexpected happened. On a steep and partially shaded section, Laura stepped on a damp stone, without noticing the risk it hid. In an instant, his foot slipped, and the world around him seemed to spin. She lost her balance and, before she could grab anything, she fell. The fall was quick and brutal. Laura went down the slope a few meters, feeling the impact on various parts of her body until she stopped in a painful position. As soon as he stopped, excruciating pain radiated through his right leg and hip. Instinctively, he tried to get up, but any movement amplified the pain, making it clear that something was seriously wrong. Friends rushed to meet her, trying to reassure her, but the panicked look on their faces only confirmed what Laura already feared: she had seriously hurt herself. When rescuers arrived, Laura was immobilized and taken to the hospital while she tried to process what had happened. Everything seemed surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. In a matter of seconds, the active and fearless woman she had always been found herself now completely vulnerable, facing a reality that would completely transform her life from then on. The fall hadn't just been a physical fall, it was the beginning of a new journey, marked by pain and uncertainty, but which would require a strength that she had yet to discover. The impact of the accident was profound and devastating, affecting Laura in ways she never imagined. In the hospital, while dealing with almost unbearable physical pain, he also began to face the psychological weight of his new reality. Laura, who had always prided herself on her independence and strength, now found herself confined to a bed, dependent on others for even the simplest tasks. Every movement, every attempt to adjust brought a sharp pain, like a constant reminder of the severity of his condition. The initial shock of the accident gave way to a range of emotions: fear, sadness, and a lingering doubt about his future. Would she walk normally again? Would he be able to return to the life he loved so much? This questioning, mixed with the trauma of an uncertain recovery, made the first days unbearable. Laura found herself vulnerable, trapped in a body that no longer seemed to respond in the same way. Anxiety intensified as she thought about the obstacles ahead: a long, painful recovery, filled with physical therapy and, possibly, additional surgeries. The thought of months, maybe even years, of treatment seemed like a heavy sentence. But at the same time, there was something inside her that didn't let her hope fade. Laura knew that the journey to recovery would not be easy and that the path to her old life would require much more than she had already faced. It was then that she began to look at this situation in a new way. He understood that, more than a physical recovery, this would be a journey of personal overcoming. He began to see each day, each small progress, as a victory, even though he was still unable to move without pain. Laura knew she would need to rebuild not just her body, but also her confidence and mental resilience. When the physical therapy phase began, Laura had a vague idea of the challenges she would face, but nothing prepared her for what was to come. On the first day, when he tried to perform a simple movement, lift his leg a few centimeters, the pain went through his body like a blade. She felt her muscles rigid, as if every fiber was being stretched to the limit. The feeling was exhausting, and any attempt to go further left her physically drained and emotionally frustrated. Laura had always been active, but here, tied to a physical therapy bed, she felt vulnerable and powerless. Movements that were once banal became giant obstacles, each step an effort that required all of his energy. The frustration grew with each session. No matter how much the physical therapists tried to encourage her, each exercise felt like a losing battle. Laura tried hard to remain calm and determined, but, deep down, progress was too slow for someone who had always been used to running and climbing mountains. The limitations of his own body felt like a prison, and the pain was a constant reminder of the accident. In the first few days, Laura even tried not to get discouraged, but soon anxiety and discouragement began to take over. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming, and, at many times, she wondered if she would really be able to overcome that phase. Overcoming physical pain was only part of the challenge. The mental barrier Laura faced was even more relentless. Since the accident, every time she tried to perform a boulder movement, such as bending her leg or leaning on her hip, a wave of fear paralyzed her. She relived the moment of the fall, the impact, the feeling of loss of control and, above all, the trauma of realizing that her body could fail again. This fear became an invisible but powerful obstacle, fueled by the memory of what I had suffered and uncertainty about the future. The reluctance to push his body grew with each session. Even under the guidance of physiotherapists, Laura was hesitant to move forward. The voice of fear was constant, telling him that if he tried too hard, he might hurt himself again. At the same time, she felt torn between the desire to move forward and the anxiety of facing the pain that each effort brought. Memories of the accident and ongoing pain reminded her of her new limitations, undermining the confidence she had always had in her own strength. In moments of greatest tension, Laura felt trapped, as if the trauma of the accident had robbed her of her courage and determination. The battle was now internal. She needed to confront not only the physical pain, but also her own fears, to believe again that her body was capable of resisting and recovering. With each day of recovery, Laura found herself caught in an emotional turmoil. No matter how hard he tried, progress was slow and physical limitations were constant. She remembered the life she had before the accident, the challenging trails and stunning landscapes that she explored with ease. Now, the simple act of walking a few steps without pain seemed like an impossible achievement. The reality of her new limitations was like a shadow that followed her, and no matter how much she tried to remain optimistic, discouragement and frustration often took over. Inside, Laura was confronting the need to accept her current condition, something that seemed to go against everything she had always believed about herself. The questions piled up: will I ever feel whole again? Will I be able to go back to the way I was before? These doubts brought emotional pain that was sometimes more intense than the physical. She struggled to believe in her own recovery, but the process of accepting her limitations was exhausting, almost as if she were giving up a part of who she had always been. During physical therapy sessions and moments of rest, Laura frequently confronted these thoughts. It was as if every limitation that appeared was a reminder of what he had lost and how much his life had changed. Some days, despair and sadness would overcome her, and she would wonder if it was worth it to keep trying. Yet at the same time, Laura felt a stubborn pull inside her, a small flame that reminded her that her recovery was still in her hands, even if the road was long and uncertain. The emotional confrontation was intense, but it also became a driving force for her, little by little, to find new ways to rebuild her life. Amidst so much uncertainty, Laura realized that, to win this battle, she would need to change her perspective. It was at that moment that he decided to establish small objectives, simple and achievable goals, which could serve as support points to keep motivation alive. Instead of focusing on complete recovery, which still seemed distant and unattainable, she began to focus on small daily advances: getting out of bed alone, enduring a few minutes of walking with the aid of crutches, bending her knee a little more each week. These goals, however modest they seemed, began to give him a new sense of purpose. Each achievement, no matter how small, represented a personal victory. Laura began to understand that progress was not linear, but that each step, each pain endured and each movement achieved contributed to her recovery. The physical therapists also encouraged her to recognize these small steps as big advances. With each session, Laura started to enter with a new attitude, determined to face limitations with the courage she always had. The strategy of focusing on small goals gave her the motivation to move forward and, little by little, transformed the recovery process into a journey of rediscovery and empowerment. Now, instead of thinking about the mountain she would need to climb to get back to who she was, Laura focused on the stones she needed to overcome one by one. Small strides became the fuel of her resilience, and every step taken, no matter how small, was a testament to her strength and determination. This new perspective allowed Laura to see that, even in the midst of challenges, she was still capable of creating a story of overcoming. Throughout her recovery journey, Laura's friends and family were instrumental, acting as pillars that sustained her strength through the most difficult times. From the first day of the accident, they were by his side, offering support and words of encouragement. For Laura, every hospital visit and every phone call was proof that she was not alone in this battle. Her family reorganized their routine to be present and, at home, prepared everything so that she could feel comfortable and supported. Every gesture, every little help, was a reminder that, even with all her limitations, she still had a network of love around her. Her friends, who always accompanied her on trails and adventures, now encouraged her to see every small victory in physiotherapy as an achievement. Whenever she felt discouraged or frustrated with her lack of progress, they were there to remind her of her own strength and resilience. They helped her reset goals, recognize progress, and celebrate every small achievement, even if it was just one extra step down the hallway or a few pain-free minutes. Over the months, the constant presence and gestures of affection became a source of motivation for Laura, who now knew that her effort was not only for herself, but also for everyone who believed in her recovery. These moments of support, often silent but always present, renewed Laura's faith in her own abilities. Every encouraging smile, every hug, and every word of encouragement from her family and friends were crucial for her to face the rehabilitation journey with more hope. She learned that, in every challenge that life brings, having people who love us by our side makes all the difference. And, with this support, Laura found the strength to continue believing in better days. Laura soon discovered that the big victories she imagined in physiotherapy were, in fact, a sequence of small daily achievements. At first, even moving my leg a few centimeters without pain seemed impossible, and the frustration was enormous. However, as the weeks went by, she began to realize the importance of these small advances. The first day she was able to lift her leg alone, even for a few seconds, was a milestone. The pain was still there, but the pride in seeing his body responding to the effort overcame any discomfort. It was the first moment he felt that recovery, although long, was possible. Every progress became a source of motivation. By being able to bend her knee a little more each day or stand a few more minutes standing, Laura realized that she was, in fact, improving. An advance that to someone healthy would seem insignificant, to her it was a personal victory, a firm step toward full recovery. Goals that previously seemed simple gained a new meaning, serving as fuel for your determination. Physiotherapists and family members celebrated each progress by her side, encouraging her to see these small steps as pieces of a big puzzle. These small victories, added together, formed a chain of achievements that drove Laura to move forward. The moment he was able to walk without crutches for the first time, even if just for a few steps, was especially moving. The sense of achievement and joy of seeing that their efforts were, in fact, yielding results was a powerful reminder that every sacrifice was worth it. Each step forward renewed her confidence and, slowly, she began to believe that her active life could one day be resumed. Over time, it became clear to Laura that physical pain was not the only obstacle to overcome. Although advances in physical therapy were helping her regain mobility, the emotional trauma caused by the accident continued to weigh on her. With each step, a growing fear accompanied her, the fear of falling again, of not being able to resume her active life or even of being unable to trust her own body. The accident had not only injured her body, but it had also shaken her confidence, making her question her own ability to overcome challenges. It was then that Laura decided to seek psychological help. The idea of talking to a therapist initially made her apprehensive, as she had always been the strong person, the one who dealt with problems alone. But the emotional pain was becoming unbearable, and she knew she needed to face the trauma in a different way. By seeking psychological support, Laura took an important step towards caring not only for her body, but also for her mind, an essential aspect of her recovery. During the sessions, Laura was challenged to explore the emotions that arose after the accident: fear, insecurity, anger and, above all, the feeling of helplessness. Over time, the therapist helped her understand that these feelings were natural after trauma, but that they didn't need to define who she was or how she saw herself. Together, they worked on techniques to deal with fear and anxiety, such as positive visualization and mindfulness practice, which helped her connect with her body in a more peaceful way. Therapy also helped her to redefine her relationship with her limits, to understand that, although it was necessary to respect them, this did not mean being weak or incapable. The emotional recovery process was long, but gradual. Laura began to realize that by dealing with the psychological trauma, she was not only regaining her confidence but also becoming stronger mentally. By treating emotional pain consciously and systematically, she found a new sense of control over her life and body, which motivated her to continue facing daily challenges. Throughout her recovery, Laura began to incorporate techniques to control the anxiety that arose frequently, especially in moments of intense pain or when she faced another obstacle in physical therapy. The therapist suggested, among other things, the practice of meditation and deep breathing techniques, which soon became his allies in finding relief. Anxiety, which previously seemed like a constant in her life, began to be addressed in a more conscious way, with simple and effective strategies that helped her to better connect with her body and the situation she was experiencing. One of the techniques Laura learned was diaphragmatic breathing, also known as abdominal breathing. Whenever she felt her anxiety rising, whether after a particularly painful physical therapy session or when thinking about the uncertainty of the future, she would close her eyes and begin breathing deeply, focusing on expanding her belly as she inhaled and contracting as she exhaled. This simple exercise, practiced consistently, helped reduce tension in your body, providing a feeling of calm and control. By focusing on her breathing, Laura was able to divert her mind from anxious thoughts, focusing her attention on the present moment and reducing the impact of anxiety on her body. Additionally, Laura began practicing mindfulness meditation. By learning to observe her thoughts and emotions without identifying with them, she was able to distance herself from the fear and insecurity that often took over her mind. Meditation, done gradually, helped her develop the ability to be more present and less overwhelmed by what she couldn't control. Over time, she began to notice that by accepting her limitations without judgment, her anxiety decreased significantly. The practice also taught her to be kinder to herself, allowing herself to go through difficult times without demanding so much. These anxiety management techniques not only improved Laura's emotional well-being, but they also helped build a more positive mindset toward her recovery. She began to see challenges as temporary and surmountable, rather than as insurmountable barriers. With meditation and breath control, she was able to create a space of inner peace that helped her face each day with more courage and resilience. As the months passed and Laura's physical recovery slowly progressed, she felt like the biggest battle was still in her mind. The emotional pain and fear persisted, and she often felt unmotivated, questioning whether she would ever be able to return to the active and adventurous life she had before the accident. It was in this moment of discouragement that she turned to stories of others who had faced similar struggles and found an unexpected source of strength. Reading about the experiences of people who had been in serious accidents and overcome extraordinary physical and emotional challenges, Laura found a renewal of hope. One of the stories that touched her most was that of a woman who had suffered a serious traffic accident, being in a coma for weeks and facing years of rehabilitation. She described her journey of pain and frustration, but also of resilience and determination, sharing how each small victory along the way was celebrated as a great achievement. This made Laura reflect on her own trajectory and how, although her path was different, the feelings of struggle and overcoming were universal. As she read about these stories, she realized she was not alone. Many people had experienced trauma and, although the recovery process was long and painful, they managed to bounce back, regaining their independence and, in many cases, overcoming limitations they thought were permanent. From then on, Laura began to see her recovery from a new perspective. Each story of overcoming was a reminder that, even in the most difficult circumstances, it was possible to rise again and find a new way of living. These stories inspired her to keep going, even on days when it felt like pain and fear were stopping her from moving forward. They gave Laura a renewed sense of purpose, showing her that the struggle was worth it and that adversity was often just a part of the growing process. She realized that, by moving forward, she was creating her own story of overcoming, and that, in itself, motivated her not to give up. As the months passed, the first signs of progress became more evident. Laura no longer found herself completely dependent on others to carry out simple daily tasks, such as getting up or going to the bathroom. Physiotherapy sessions have become more challenging, but also more rewarding. One of the most significant milestones in her recovery was when she was able, for the first time, to take steps with the aid of crutches. Although it was a short journey, the feeling of freedom it brought was immeasurable. Walking, even with the support of crutches, represented a great advance. Laura clearly remembers how her heart beat faster as she put her first foot on the ground, supported by her crutches, feeling relief mixed with fear. The fear of falling again was present, but the feeling of overcoming and control was stronger. With each walk, even if short, Laura felt that the effort was paying off. The pain still arose, but it was more bearable now, and confidence in her body was slowly beginning to rebuild. During these walks, Laura found herself in an internal duel. Anxiety and fear of a new accident tried to take over, but she was determined to continue. The crutches, which initially felt like a constant reminder of his weakness, began to become a tool of strength and resilience. Every step taken, every movement achieved, represented a victory, both physical and emotional. This moment of walking with crutches was crucial for Laura, as it was when she began to realize that even though her recovery was slow and required patience, she was, in fact, getting closer to her goal. The crutches no longer symbolized a limitation, but a symbol of his journey. She knew there was still a long way to go, but now, with the knowledge that she was making progress, Laura found renewed hope. She was beginning to believe more firmly that her active life could be resumed and that the trail that had once seemed unattainable was within reach again. Each new movement, no matter how simple, brought with it an indescribable feeling of victory for Laura. The recovery process, although exhausting, began to be marked by small milestones that became personal victories. When, for the first time, he was able to flex his leg without feeling sharp pain, or when he was able to stand for longer than he ever imagined, a smile would appear on his face. With each gesture achieved, Laura felt a wave of accomplishment. The body, which previously seemed like a weight, now became a tool for overcoming. Each time she managed to accomplish a previously impossible task, such as walking a little further or simply getting up from a chair without help, a feeling of achievement invaded her, giving her energy to continue. These moments were not just physical, but emotional. It was as if every movement was a reminder of her own strength, a clear sign that she was going beyond her previous limits. The pain, although still present, no longer seemed so paralyzing, and the frustration of before, when I felt that nothing was moving forward, gave way to genuine satisfaction with each step taken. Laura was beginning to realize that the true victory was not just in achieving full recovery, but in being able to celebrate these small achievements that made the journey worth it. These feelings of victory also extended to his emotional life. Every movement, every progress, represented more than simple physical recovery. It was a reaffirmation of her resilience, her strength to face life's challenges. Laura now saw herself as someone who, despite adversity, was finding herself again. The fear of failure diminished, and the confidence, which previously seemed fragile, grew stronger with each new move. The recovery process turned into a path of self-discovery, where Laura learned that, more than physical milestones, true victory lay in perseverance, in believing that, despite the difficulties, she could always go one step further. Laura quickly realized that to keep her motivation alive during the difficult days of recovery, she would need to set small goals. The road to full recovery seemed long and challenging, so instead of focusing on the whole picture, she chose to break the journey down into small victories. Each goal set was a step that, even though it was discreet, made her feel like she was moving forward. The first of them was simple, being able to walk to the door of your house without stopping. Although it seemed trivial to someone healthy, for Laura it represented an immense challenge. She knew that every step taken to get there would be an achievement. When she reached the door and returned, with the help of her crutches, a satisfied smile formed on her face. The feeling of having accomplished a goal, no matter how small, filled his heart with pride and renewed his energy. Each week, the goals became a little more demanding, but also more rewarding. Laura began to set daily challenges, such as trying to get out of bed without anyone's help, or gradually increasing the time she spent standing, even if it was just a few minutes more each day. The goals, both simple and meaningful, helped her visualize tangible progress, which in turn strengthened her confidence. She began to realize that recovery was not a magical process that happened overnight, but a journey made up of incremental steps. Each small victory, like bending the knee a little more, or taking an extra step without pain, was a fundamental piece in the confidence that was being regained. These goals also became a way to protect yourself emotionally. Instead of letting herself be consumed by the idea that recovery would be impossible or never-ending, Laura focused on what she could control in that moment, the here and now. And it made her feel that with each goal accomplished, she was closer than she thought. Furthermore, when she saw her body responding positively to her efforts, she also realized that her mind needed to get used to following the same line. Each small goal achieved became a reminder that she was capable of facing more than she imagined. Over time, goals stopped being just a means to an end, but a daily practice that motivated her to take the next step and continue to believe that her recovery was possible. These goals also became a way to protect yourself emotionally. Instead of letting herself be consumed by the idea that recovery would be impossible or never-ending, Laura focused on what she could control in that moment, the here and now. And it made her feel that with each goal accomplished, she was closer than she thought. Furthermore, when she saw her body responding positively to her efforts, she also realized that her mind needed to get used to following the same line. Each small goal achieved became a reminder that she was capable of facing more than she imagined. Over time, goals stopped being just a means to an end, but a daily practice that motivated her to take the next step and continue to believe that her recovery was possible. The first step outside your home was filled with nervousness, but at the same time, a sense of accomplishment. The fear of falling was there, like a constant shadow, but Laura forced herself to focus on the experience she was having, not on what could happen. With each step along the way, she felt a growing sense of belonging to the place she had always loved. The sound of leaves blowing in the wind, the smell of damp earth, the singing of birds, it all made her feel like she was returning to herself, to the center of her life before the accident. The journey was slow and cautious, with breaks to rest and check how his body reacted to the effort. Every step I took was a reminder of how hard she had fought to get there. And, upon reaching the end of the trail, Laura felt a wave of gratitude and victory. It wasn't about being completely recovered or having done a complex trail. It was about having challenged her own fears, about the courage to step out of her comfort zone and go back to doing something that once made her feel strong and free. This symbolic return to nature was a turning point for Laura. Not just because of the feeling of being reconnected with her surroundings, but because of the realization that she had overcome something deep within herself. From that moment on, she knew that, even though difficulties still arose, the strength she sought within herself was present, and she had taken the first step towards resuming the active life she always loved. As Laura progressed down the trail, the fear that had previously felt paralyzing began to manifest itself in subtle ways, like a constant whisper in her mind. Each step was accompanied by a small tremor, a hesitation in his movements. The fear of falling, of not being able to support the weight of her own body, of losing her balance again, was still there, like a shadow that followed her. But Laura didn't give up. Each step on the trail was not just a physical movement, but an emotional achievement. She knew that the only way to overcome fear was to face it head-on, and that's exactly what she did. The terrain, once familiar and safe, now seemed challenging and unpredictable. But with each small obstacle, like a root that appeared in the path or a slippery rock, Laura took a deep breath and took her time. She wasn't running to get to the end of the trail. What mattered, at that moment, was the process, the simple act of continuing to walk, of defying fear with each new movement. The sound of your crutches hitting the floor became a comforting rhythm, almost like an affirmation of your presence and determination. With each step she took, she felt her fear lessen a little, replaced by a sense of control and renewed confidence. There were times, of course, when the fear intensified, like when she reached a steeper area of the trail or when her body felt tired. At these times, Laura knew that the most important thing was to take one step at a time. She began to focus on her surroundings, the beauty of the landscape, the fresh, invigorating air. This helped her keep her fear under control. By observing the small details of the trail, a fallen leaf, a bird flying, she was reminded of her connection with nature, with the strength she had always found in that environment. With each new step, Laura's confidence grew. She began to realize that the fear would not go away completely, but that she had the power to not let it dominate her. Fear, which was previously an emotional and physical block, began to be seen by Laura as something to be respected, but not feared. She understood that it was possible to live with him and still move forward. With each step along the path, she felt stronger, more capable, and closer to her old life. And, upon reaching the end of the trail, without falling, without giving up, the feeling of overcoming was indescribable. Laura had known that the real challenge was not the rough terrain or the difficulty of the trail, but the courage to continue despite the fear. And at that moment, she knew she had won the battle against her own limitations. When Laura finally reached the top of the trail, a profound silence enveloped her, broken only by the gentle sound of the wind in the trees and the distant echo of birds chirping. She looked at the horizon, where the mountains stretched out into a sea of green and blue, and felt a wave of peace that invaded her in an almost transcendental way. The view was stunning, but what really touched her was the feeling that, finally, she was back. Back to herself. There, at the top of the trail, the fear that once dominated her seemed like a distant memory. The pain, which had followed her like a shadow for so long, now seemed just a part of the process, a mark of what she had achieved to be there. The pain had not completely disappeared, but its meaning had changed. It was no longer something that defined her, but a part of the path that had led her to that moment of triumph. Laura closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the cool breeze on her face, and when she opened them again, she smiled, almost without meaning to. She was there, in a place that had previously seemed unreachable, and she had arrived alone. Alone, not because she didn't have support, but because, at that moment, she realized that true overcoming did not come from others, but from herself, from her decision to continue, even when everything seemed to say otherwise. The body was still far from full recovery, the pain was still there, but it no longer felt like a prison. Now, it was a reminder of her journey, a reminder of how much she had gone through to be where she was. Laura's relationship with pain was redefined at that top. She no longer saw it as something to be feared or avoided, but as something that was part of the process of growing and overcoming. Every step that led her to that moment was an affirmation of her strength, of her capacity for resistance. She was no longer afraid of pain, she accepted it as something temporary, something that could be controlled, not as something permanent. Looking at the mountains in front of her, Laura knew that there were still challenges ahead, perhaps even more difficult than this one. But, at that moment, with a heart full of gratitude and a sense of peace that only nature could provide, she knew that the worst was over. Laura had conquered more than the top of the trail. She had gained a new understanding about herself, about her strength and her ability to transform. Pain, now, was not an obstacle, it was a bridge that had taken her to that place of conquest and serenity. She finally understood that true overcoming is not about eliminating pain, but about learning to live with it, about finding strength in adversity. There, at the top of the trail, Laura was not only at the highest point of the mountain, but also at the highest point of her recovery. Laura's experience, from her accident to the top of the trail, was more than a physical journey, it was a profound process of resilience and transformation. With each challenge faced, from the intense pain after a fall to days of frustration in physical therapy, she found herself being shaped, not just in terms of her body, but, more significantly, in her mind and spirit. What began as a struggle to return to an active life gradually transformed into a path of self-knowledge and personal empowerment. In the first days after the accident, when everything seemed impossible, Laura saw herself as just a victim of circumstances. Pain was his reality, fear his constant companion. But as the months passed and the small victories piled up, something began to change. She began to realize that, despite all her suffering, there was something bigger happening inside her. Every painful movement, every effortful step taken, was actually strengthening her mind in ways she had never imagined. Not just in terms of physical endurance, but in the way she dealt with adversity. The resistance that was once just a matter of overcoming the pain turned into something much deeper, an emotional resistance, an internal strength that sustained her on the most difficult days. Laura began to realize that true transformation wasn't just about regaining her mobility or getting back to hiking the trails she loved so much. It was about the ability to reinvent yourself, to learn to deal with difficult times in a healthier and more balanced way. Pain, instead of being an enemy, became an ally in this growth process. She understood that pain was a part of the process of evolution, and that, without it, she might not have found the inner strength she now possessed. Every obstacle, every challenge, every tear shed was a step towards a stronger, wiser version of herself. Laura's transformation was also visible in her perception of the world around her. She learned to slow down, to appreciate the little things, the sound of a leaf blowing in the wind, the shine of the sun after a rainy morning, the company of a conversation with a friend. These things, which previously went unnoticed amid the rush of everyday life, began to have a deep meaning for her. Laura discovered that resilience was not just about enduring pain, but about being able to transform adversity into learning, strength, and, above all, gratitude. Today, looking back, Laura understands that the accident experience was a turning point in her life. She was no longer the same person who fell on those damp rocks. She now carried a stronger version of herself, a version that knew the value of perseverance, that knew the depth of her own courage. The journey of overcoming had not been easy, but she knew that, in the end, she emerged not only with a stronger body, but with a firmer soul, ready to face whatever came next. She had finally turned pain into strength, and adversity into an opportunity for personal growth. Over time, Laura began to realize something that had previously seemed impossible to understand. Pain, which for so long had been her greatest enemy, was now becoming a profound learning experience. As she looked at the trajectory of her recovery, she no longer saw pain as just a limit, but as a silent teacher who taught her valuable lessons about life, about resilience, and about who she was. Pain, which at first seemed like the biggest obstacle to be overcome, had become the key that opened doors to a new understanding of herself. Every moment of suffering had brought an opportunity to grow, to understand his weaknesses and turn them into strengths. In the first days after the accident, Laura found herself completely limited, almost powerless in the face of pain. The simple act of walking seemed like a huge challenge, and she often wondered if she would ever become the active, adventurous person she once was. But, as the months passed and her recovery process continued, she realized that the pain was not the end of her story, but a part of it. That's when she began to change her perspective on pain. Instead of seeing it as a barrier, she began to understand it as a learning opportunity, a way to connect more deeply with her own body and its limits. This new perspective made Laura begin to question what limit really meant. She realized that what she had previously considered a limit, the physical pain, the fear of not fully recovering, the limitations imposed by the injury, were actually just starting points on a journey of self-discovery. Laura discovered that true overcoming was not in eliminating pain, but in learning to live with it, to accept it without it dominating her. Every step taken, every physical therapy exercise performed, every time she allowed herself to feel the pain and still move forward, she was expanding her resilience, not just physically, but emotionally. Pain taught him patience. She learned that healing doesn't happen all at once, and that the recovery process is more important than the final destination. She also understood that the body has its own rhythms and that sometimes pushing limits can be just as harmful as not challenging them. Now, Laura knew that, instead of fighting the pain, she could use this learning as fuel for her personal evolution. Every sign of pain became an opportunity to adjust your posture, to pause and reflect on what really mattered, your long-term well-being, your mental health and inner peace. With this new understanding, pain stopped being something to be feared and became an ally in your journey of transformation. Laura began to realize that life is not made up of just happy or easy moments, but a mix of ups and downs that, when understood and experienced fully, form a meaningful whole. By embracing the pain as a learning experience, she gained a new perspective on life. She was no longer defined by the challenges she faced, but by how she overcame them. Every scar, every physical limitation, now represented a story of overcoming, a story of how she had transformed pain into a powerful life lesson. Laura's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how difficult or unexpected the obstacles life throws our way, we all have the strength within us to overcome them. It's not about avoiding pain or waiting for challenges to go away, but how we choose to face them. The journey of overcoming is not made of big leaps, but of small steps, one at a time. Sometimes you need to walk slowly, carefully, respecting the limits of your body and mind. Sometimes you need to take a step back to gain momentum and move forward. But no matter what the process is like, every step taken is a victory. True strength is in following, even when doubt and fear try to stop us. Every moment of pain becomes an opportunity to get to know ourselves better, to learn to be resilient, to understand that, often, the greatest challenges are those that teach us the most valuable lessons. Laura, by facing her fear, by accepting pain as part of the path, discovered an inner strength she never imagined she possessed. She was no longer defined by the limitations of her body or the fears that arose throughout her recovery. She was defined by her ability to keep going, to move forward, to fight, even when the path seemed long and uncertain. The message Laura leaves us is clear: all of us, regardless of our circumstances, have the ability to overcome our own obstacles. The path may be long and full of challenges, but with each step taken, with each moment overcome, we become stronger. True overcoming does not come from eliminating pain or fears, but from learning to live with them, from using each difficulty as a stepping stone to achieve something greater. As Laura proved, no matter how difficult the path seems, the secret is to move forward, one step at a time, with courage and faith in your own ability to overcome. Each step is a reminder that you are capable of achieving what seemed impossible. So, did you like this story of overcoming? If you also believe that every step counts and that, even in the most difficult times, we can find the strength to move forward, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, we share inspiring stories, tips on how to overcome life's challenges, and more. If you are looking for motivation, support and stories that will transform your outlook on life, subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any content. Together, we can learn, grow, and overcome obstacles, one step at a time. Don't forget to leave a like and comment what you think. Let's go together on this journey of overcoming. Until the next video,